I definitely think this is a very clear example of somebody who has abused our system over a long period of time.
It's not about a naive young female. It's about a repeat predator offender.
We're talking about an evil person, and somewhere along his life he needed to be stopped. And unfortunately, Kristine was the stopping point.
Kristine Johnson was a young woman who was murdered in February 2003 by a man who lured her to a Hollywood Hills location with the promise of a Bond girl audition. Her killer was sentenced to 25 years to life with the possibility of parole. Seemed like justice enough then. But now, that killer might gain his freedom a lot sooner than everyone had hoped. What happens if Victor Paleologus gets out of prison? Stick with us to find out. Victor Paleologus, now 61, pled guilty to the murder of Kristine Johnson back in 2006. In May 2023, Victor Paleologus became eligible for parole, but in a shocking twist, he voluntarily waived the right to a hearing for 2 years. Terry Hall felt elated when her daughter's convicted killer waived his right to a parole hearing date. According to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, he waived this right on the 25th of August 2023. Following this, Kristine Johnson's mother, Terry Hall, sat for an interview with the Oxygen News Channel. When asked about the parole hearing being waived, Terry responded, "What a weight off of my back this is." She also explained how she had always carried that burden at the back of her mind. In her words, "It's interesting. Sometimes in life, you don't realize what a big burden you're carrying until it's lifted from you. And it is okay that she feels this way." Victor Paleologus took her daughter's life. He may have lost a couple of decades behind bars, but the truth is that he is very much alive, whereas her daughter, Kristine, is gone. Hall noted her feeling of relief is only temporary, as Paleologus is next eligible for a parole hearing in November of 2025. Before moving on to the fight to keep Kristine's killer behind bars, let's go back to the specifics of this case. According to court documents, it was the day after Valentine's Day in 2003 that Paleologus first spotted Kristine Johnson at the Century City Mall in Los Angeles. He cooked up a story and convinced her to meet him at a different location. The story was simple. He pretended he could get her a film audition. 2 weeks later, on the 3rd of March, Kristine Johnson's body was discovered by hikers in a ravine in the Hollywood Hills. According to the police reports, she had been strangled and had her hands and ankles still bound when she was found. Later on, a detective who had worked on the case told Dateline NBC that her body was discovered halfway in a sleeping bag. This is why her body from the shoulders up was decomposed, as it had been left out during the rain. It truly is a heartbreaking case, one that began with the false promise of a big break in Hollywood. Kristine Johnson was 20 years old when she left the small town of Saugatuck, Michigan, and relocated to Southern California. While completing her education, she also worked to make her dream of breaking into Hollywood a reality. When it looked like that big break wasn't going to happen, she considered returning home. But for some reason, she wanted to hold and fight for her passion a little longer. Kristine stayed determined and secured a job as a production assistant for a new movie. Unfortunately, her struggles in the industry persisted, causing her to take a job at a cell phone company while never giving up on her dreams. Kristine had moved to Los Angeles in 2001 and unfortunately stayed until 2003, when she would run into Victor Paleologus. February 15, 2003. Kristine had spoken to her mother over the phone and shared her plans to visit the mall that day. Her mother had encouraged her to get something as a Valentine's gift for herself. They said their goodbyes, and Kristine set out for the mall. Nothing would have prepared Terry for the fact that this was the last time she would ever speak to her daughter. By February 17, Terry was alarmed that she had not spoken to Kristine in a couple of days. This was unusual because she spoke to her daughter every day. Kristine was also absent from work, and this further alarmed her parents. Fearing that something had happened to her, they reported her missing to the police. A lot of time had already gone by, so the police immediately initiated a search protocol. Kristine's family traveled to Los Angeles and immediately took action to raise awareness of Kristine's disappearance by distributing posters with her image at the entrance of her apartment. Eager to assist in locating Kristine, the police shared her case details with the media and even established a tip line. This immediately gathered a lot of attention and sparked a widespread search effort. volunteers trooped in. Together, they posted flyers, scoured empty lots, and everywhere possible to find Kristine. The investigators eventually contacted Kristine's credit card company. They then learned of her purchases at the Westfield Century City Mall that day on February 15th. The items included a pair of black stilettos, a high black miniskirt, and a white man's shirt. Going to the mall, they also retrieved the surveillance footage from that day. This helped them confirm her presence at the mall around 1:00 p.m. that day. Sadly, it offered no clues about her subsequent whereabouts. Kristine Johnson had left that mall, walking towards her death. Thankfully, Victor Paleologus would not get away with it. During the trial of Victor Paleologus, a shocking number of about 40 witnesses testified against him. Many of them were women who were lucky or smart enough to escape him. Most of them detailed a pattern of the defendant. He seemed methodical, as he always convinced his potential victims to meet him at different locations, all in the guise of giving them heartwarming job opportunities. When Kristine Johnson had first disappeared, the investigators spoke with Kristine Johnson's roommate. She told them that Kristine had come home super excited from the shopping center that day. Kristine had dropped the hint that she was going to try out for a role in the new James Bond movie. As the events continued to unfold, everyone involved in finding Kristine was thankful that she had said that before disappearing. If she had not, her killer might have been walking around free even till this day. Thankfully, the detectives took it up and held a press conference about Kristine's disappearance to that effect. At that point, the details of the missing persons case struck the heart of another young woman. The story surrounding the disappearance of Kristine Johnson seemed eerily similar to that of another, and this woman just had to speak up. So shortly after the press conference, a young woman named Susan Murphy came forward to the police and narrated her own story. Just like Kristine Johnson, Susan had also been approached at the Century City Mall just a few weeks earlier. Susan brought her boyfriend, who is a second-degree black belt, along with her when she went to meet the man from the mall. Her boyfriend stayed behind in the car while she walked up to the intersection where she was supposed to meet Victor alone. When Victor showed up, he suggested that they both go into what looked like an abandoned building to Susan for drinks. This was when she asked him to show his ID and also pointed to her companion in the car. Susan explained that the man got angry and told her she wouldn't be the right fit for the part after all, before running away. Susan Murphy told Dateline that her women's intuition led her to contact authorities now that she heard about Kristine's case. Susan described the man who presented himself as Victor Thomas, who met her at that same mall.by, giving a detailed description of his physical features. Susan helped the police create a sketch of Victor Paleologus. Everything finally came together when the parole officer of Victor Paleologus saw the sketch and made the connection. The parole officer was convinced that this was the same guy who had recently gotten out of jail for assaulting a woman. The police finally had a culprit. To build up the case against him more, other women also came forward about similar experiences with him. And all of these women came forward to testify against him in court. One of such women is 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍, whom he approached sometime in the late 1990s. She was an actress at the time and had already bagged a small but regular role on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So just like any other young actress, Kathy felt that top-of-the-world feeling when she met a man who mentioned that he could get her a role in the iconic James Bond movies. The story was the same. He worked with the franchise, and he was cool with the filmmakers who were currently looking for new talent. Only this time, he wasn't Victor Thomas. He introduced himself to 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍 as Brian, a Disney executive. Vividly recalling that experience from 1998, Kathy explained that she agreed to meet him, but had brought along a male companion for safety. Kathy drove to the address Brian had given her. She waited in the car like he had said because he would send someone to get her. But no one showed up to meet her that day. Kathy was convinced that Brian had spotted her friend in the car and was scared off. Just like Susan, Kathy was spared a terrible encounter with Victor Paleologus. During the trial, other crimes of Victor Paleologus came to light, crimes which he committed before killing Kristine Johnson. According to the district attorney's statement of view in the Kristine Johnson case, Paleologus had been convicted of several crimes, including burglary, stalking, forgery, and sexual assaults. The month before the murder of Kristine Johnson, He was released from prison after serving 5 years for assault with intent to commit rape and attempted forcible rape. In that case, Paleologus was accused of approaching the victim at Sky Bar in Hollywood on the 30th of August back in 1998. In true Paleologus fashion, he had told this woman that he was a Disney movie producer and that he was scouting young women to photograph for the promotion of a James Bond movie. According to the district attorney's statement in the Kristine Johnson case, he told her to meet him at a Ritz-Carlton hotel and insisted that she wear a black miniskirt, nude-colored pantyhose, and black high heels. The woman met him at the hotel but was then asked to move to another location for the shoot. Parading fake contracts in his hand, Paleologus directed the woman to come to his supposed office. Later on, this room was actually discovered to be the site of an attack he carried out on another victim earlier in 1996. Unfortunately, the woman from the Sky Bar followed him there. Now that they were alone, Paleologus managed to tie a cord around her ankles and forced her into a pose. Paleologus proceeded to pin her to the floor and used his necktie to tie her left wrist. According to the district attorney of Los Angeles County, the woman later revealed that he attempted to rape her, but she was able to break free and make it out the door. She ran as fast as she could to the parking area and immediately drove to the nearest police station. This was the case that sent Victor Paleologus to prison. One would think that convicts actually regret their actions and become better people while incarcerated. Perhaps that may be the case for some convicts, but the same cannot be said for Paleologus. Days after getting released, he targeted Susan Murphy, and when she got away, he targeted Kristine Johnson. One thing he seemed to learn from his time in prison was to take the life of his next victim so he could not be tied to his crimes again. We know what you might be thinking. How does a man like this get eligible for early parole after being convicted for the murder of the bright and beautiful Kristine Johnson? First off, Victor Paleologus had entered a guilty plea for his crimes. According to court transcripts, this plea deal involved admitting to murdering Kristine Johnson just so that the death penalty, which the district attorney was initially pursuing, would be knocked off the table. Just like that, Victor Paleologus was sentenced to 25 years to life with the possibility of parole. As you can already see, entering the guilty plea was not a sign of remorse or anything of the sort. It was an act of self-preservation, to escape the death penalty and possibly butter up future officials during his parole hearing. Interestingly, reports suggest that Paleologus caught on to the fact that the defense team did not actually have substantial or hard proof DNA evidence to link him to the murder of Kristine Johnson. As a result, he wrote a letter to the judge on the day of his sentencing and asked to withdraw his guilty plea. The judge denied this request and proceeded to pass his sentence. Paleologus later petitioned the court for an appeal. He claimed that his attorney pressured him to take the plea deal rather than look for the best ways to defend him. Thankfully, the Supreme Court of California denied this appeal in 2008. Going back to the interview of Kristine Johnson's mother, Terry Hall was asked what she would have done differently if she could reverse the hands of time. With respect to the current situation, Terry says that she would have taken more of an issue with the sentence, especially because it allowed for parole. In her own words, "I was told there was no way that this perpetrator would ever be granted parole." She also added that victims' rights have been severely diminished over the past 20 years, and I'm speaking directly about the county of L.A. Terry highlighted the fact that there is early parole eligibility for the elderly, and that prosecutors have been removed from the parole hearing process. These were some of the changes that Los Angeles County had made in recent years that she was not comfortable with. Victor Paleologus's opportunity for a parole hearing came a lot earlier than his original sentence called for. Terry also revealed that she feels the law is protecting her daughter's murderer. In her own words, "The inmate actually has more rights than I do as the victim, and I'm representing my daughter as a victim. One thing that's just glaring is the perpetrator actually gets assigned legal counsel, and I do not. Previously, the victims would go into a parole hearing, and the sides would have equal, representation there. The scales of justice are definitely not balanced going into the situation. And she is not wrong. According to a 2020 directive from Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon, deputy district attorneys have been instructed not to attend parole hearings and to only support in writing the grant of parole for a person who has already served their mandatory minimum period of incarceration. According to Gascon's guidelines, if a person is deemed high risk for reoffending, the deputy district attorney must remain neutral in the parole process. To be fair, there was research to back up these changes. Research showed low reoffending rates for older people in prison. The directive specifically noted that those aged 50-64 were less likely to reoffend. Top that off with the high costs of keeping so many people in prison, the change seemed like a good idea. According to the directive, billions are spent on locking up people, 96% of whom will not even commit a technical violation once released. It is a fair argument, but one that would never make sense to people like Terry Hall, who have lost loved ones to people like Victor Paleologus. She called the argument that older inmates are less likely to re-offend insidious. In her own words, "We know that there are a lot of people that are past the age of 60 that are still capable of committing horrendous crimes, so that doesn't sit well with me." And she is not wrong. Paleologus went to prison for assault and was released, only to go on and commit a more sinister crime. Terry is not the only one terrified of Victor Paleologus's release. Kathy DeBuono also spoke to the Oxygen News channel, and she admitted that the chance of Paleologus being let out on parole terrified her. Kathy is now a psychotherapist, and she firmly believes that Paleologus is the kind of offender that will never stop. In her own words, the parole process is a lot of pain, and a lot of heartache, and a lot of energy, and a lot of time and work. When they gave him that deal, they sentenced Christie's family, Christie's mother, father, brother, and the rest of us, all the women who testified, they sentenced us to life. Now every time he's up for parole, we have to deal with this. According to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, Victor Paleologus is currently housed at the California Institution for Men in Chino, California. Terry Hall plans to stay updated with everything concerning Victor Paleologus, from his health status to any changing legislation, as well as where he's incarcerated leading up to his next possible parole hearing in November 2025. Terry plans to stay updated and fight his possible release. The group called Justice for Christie, formed in memory of Kristine Johnson and to campaign against Paleologus' release, remains active till date.